It was one of those bright summer mornings when the streets were quiet, the sun was warm, and the world felt full of possibilities. On the corner of a quiet neighborhood street, a little girl named Aaliyah carefully arranged a small folding table her mother had helped her carry out from the garage. She was only 10 years old, yet there was something in her eyes that showed determination far beyond her age. Her hands were small, but they worked quickly. She lined up water bottles one by one, making sure they stood straight, labels facing forward. Some bottles were plain, others had flavored water her mother bought on sale. Next to the bottles, she placed a little sign she had written in big letters with a marker. Water $1, thank you. She had been dreaming about this moment for weeks. It was not just about selling water. To her, this little table meant freedom. It meant she could help her mother, who worked long hours at a diner just to pay rent and put food on the table. It also meant she might have enough money saved up to buy her own school supplies and maybe, if she was lucky, something special for her mom's birthday. Her mother, Monica, had always told her, "Baby, no dream is too small. If you put your heart in it, the world will notice." Those words stayed with Aaliyah every single day. So here she was, standing proudly behind her table with a box of extra bottles at her feet, waiting for someone to pass by. She was nervous, yes, but she was also excited. She wanted to show that even a young girl could create something good with her own two hands. The first few minutes were quiet. A car passed, then another, but no one stopped. Aaliyah stood straight, forcing herself not to lose hope. "Be patient," she whispered to herself. "Someone will stop." And then, a man jogging down the street slowed when he saw her stand. Sweat poured down his face and he smiled when he noticed the bottles of cold water lined up neatly. He jogged over, pulled out a dollar bill and said, "I'll take one, sweetheart." Perfect timing. Aaliyah's heart leaped. She handed him a cold bottle with both hands, thanking him with the biggest smile she could manage. The man grinned, opened the bottle, and took a long sip. "Delicious," he said with a wink before continuing his run. That one sale changed everything. It gave her confidence. She felt the same joy as if she had won a big prize. Soon after, a woman walking her dog stopped to buy 2 bottles, saying the dog also needed a little sprinkle of cool water. Then, a couple driving by slowed down and waved money out of their car window, happy to support the little girl's effort. Within the first hour, Aaliyah had sold more bottles than she expected. Each time someone stopped, she gave them her brightest smile, and they walked away not only with water, but with a sense of warmth from the small act of supporting her. Neighbors she had never really spoken to now knew her by name. People admired how hard-working she was for her age. For Aaliyah, it was more than money. It was pride. Every dollar felt like a small brick in the foundation of her dream. She imagined buying her notebooks, pencils, maybe even some new shoes. She imagined handing her mother a gift and seeing her face light up. But life, as her mother always said, has its tests. And sometimes when you are doing something good, someone will try to knock it down. Not far away, a woman named Karen sat on her porch, watching. She was in her late 30s, wearing a pink t-shirt and jeans, sipping coffee from a mug. She noticed the little table and the small crowd it attracted. At first she said nothing. But with each car that slowed down, each neighbor who handed over money, her face tightened. To her, the sight was not charming. It was annoying. She convinced herself that Aaliyah was blocking the sidewalk, that she was breaking the rules, and even worse, she allowed her own biases to shape her thoughts. Instead of seeing a child's effort, she saw something to complain about. Her mind turned bitter. She muttered under her breath, "This isn't a real business. She doesn't have a permit. Someone has to put a stop to this." While Aaliyah smiled with pride at her little stand, Karen's irritation grew. Finally, she picked up her phone, dialed 911, and with an impatient tone said, "Yes, I'd like to report someone illegally selling water on the street. No, she doesn't have a permit. It's disturbing the neighborhood." As she spoke, she looked directly at Aaliyah, narrowing her eyes, already imagining the police arriving and shutting everything down. She wanted control. She wanted to prove she was right. Meanwhile, Aaliyah had no idea what was about to happen. She was busy handing a bottle to a friendly neighbor, thanking them softly. She felt safe, loved, and proud in that moment. But just minutes later, the sound of sirens broke the calm. Blue and red lights flashed against the trees, reflecting off the parked cars. A police car slowed to a stop right in front of her stand. Aaliyah froze, her little hands trembling as she clutched a bottle of water. Her heart pounded. She had never been in trouble before. She could not understand why the police would be here. Her eyes darted around, searching for her mother who was not outside yet. She felt alone. Karen, however, stood tall, phone still in hand, pointing directly at the little girl. "That's her!" she shouted, as if Aaliyah was some kind of criminal. The officer stepped out of the car, adjusting his belt, looking from Karen to the little girl. He did not say anything at first, just watched the scene with calm, professional eyes. Aaliyah's lip trembled. She wanted to explain, but fear held her back. She thought of her mother's words. No dream is too small. She wondered if her small dream was about to be destroyed right in front of her. The jogger who had bought the first bottle earlier happened to pass by again. He stopped immediately, confusion written across his face. Other neighbors peeked out of their homes, whispering to one another, concerned about why the police were there. What had started as a simple, innocent morning now felt heavy. It was as if the whole neighborhood held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And Aaliyah, standing behind her little table, knew that this moment would either crush her spirit or teach her the most important lesson of her young life. The flashing lights from the police car painted the quiet street in shades of red and blue, and the little girl's water stand suddenly became the center of everyone's attention. Aaliyah stood frozen behind her table, clutching one of the bottles as if it could protect her. She did not fully understand what was happening, but she could feel the heavy weight of the moment pressing down on her small shoulders. Her heart thudded in her chest, her palms grew sweaty, and she glanced nervously at the neighbors who had begun to gather near their porches. The officer closed the door of his car and walked slowly toward the stand. He was tall, his uniform neat, his expression calm but serious. To Aaliyah, he looked intimidating. She had seen police officers before, but never had one walked straight toward her. She wanted to cry out for her mother, but her voice felt stuck in her throat. Karen, the woman in the pink shirt, wasted no time. She pointed a sharp finger at Aaliyah and spoke loudly so that everyone could hear. "That's her. She's the one selling water without a permit. She's been bothering the neighborhood all morning." Her voice was filled with annoyance, as if she believed she was doing the right thing. She held her phone to her ear even though the call had already ended, still standing like she was in control. The officer stopped, turned his gaze from Karen to the little girl. He did not say anything at first. His silence made the air feel even heavier. Aaliyah could feel her chest tightening, fear rising higher. She had never wanted trouble. Never imagined that her little idea to sell water could bring this kind of scene to her neighborhood. "Ma'am," the officer finally said, his voice calm. "Is this the child you called about?" "Yes," Karen said quickly, almost triumphantly. "She doesn't have permission. This isn't safe and it's against the rules. You need to shut this down immediately. She's disturbing the peace." The officer tilted his head slightly, then looked at Aaliyah again. The little girl's eyes were wide, her lips pressed together. He noticed how young she was, how innocent her table looked with just a few bottles of water and a small handwritten sign. There was nothing dangerous here, nothing harmful. He crouched down so that he could look Aaliyah in the eyes, lowering his voice. "Hey there," he said gently. "What's your name?" She swallowed hard, forcing herself to answer. "Aaliyah," she whispered. "And what are you doing out here today, Aaliyah?" She took a shaky breath. "I'm selling water," she said softly. I wanted to save money for my school things, and for my mom's birthday." The officer's expression softened, and for a moment, silence hung between them. The neighbors who had gathered leaned closer, listening. A jogger from earlier stepped forward and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She's been out here all morning, officer. She's not causing any harm, she's just working hard. I bought water from her earlier. It was the best part of my run." Another neighbor, a woman with a stroller, added, "My little boy loves her. She's polite, respectful, and she's not bothering anyone. In fact, we're proud of her." More voices rose from the small crowd. One by one, people began to defend Aaliyah, explaining how she had been nothing but kind and hardworking. Every word made Karen's face tighten with frustration. She had not expected this reaction. She had thought the officer would immediately shut everything down, that people would nod in agreement with her. Instead, the community was standing with the little girl. The officer straightened, turning his attention back to Karen. His voice was calm, but there was firmness in it. "Ma'am, this child isn't breaking any serious laws. She's not disturbing anyone. From what I can see, she's being supported by her neighbors and she's showing initiative. I don't see a problem here." Karen's mouth fell open slightly. But she doesn't have a permit," she snapped. "Rules are rules. If you let her do this, then what's next? People setting up businesses everywhere?" The officer shook his head. "There's a difference between someone running an unlicensed business and a child selling water bottles on a Saturday morning. I'm not going to punish a little girl for trying to do something positive. She's not hurting anyone." A hush fell over the group. Aaliyah's fear began to fade, replaced with a flicker of relief. She glanced at the officer, almost unable to believe his words. Then, in a move that surprised everyone, the officer reached into his pocket, pulled out a few bills, and handed them directly to Aaliyah. "I'll take 3 bottles," he said with a smile. The crowd broke into soft laughter and applause. Aaliyah's eyes widened, and for the first time since the police car had arrived, a smile returned to her face. She handed him 3 bottles, her hands still trembling, but this time with excitement rather than fear. The jogger stepped forward again. "I'll take another one too," he said, placing money on the table. The woman with the stroller followed. Soon a small line had formed at the stand, neighbors eager to show support not just with words but with actions. Karen stood there, her face red, her jaw clenched. She could feel the eyes of the community on her, not with agreement but with disapproval. Her plan had backfired. Instead of being praised for protecting the neighborhood, she was now the one being silently judged. People shook their heads at her, whispering under their breath about how cruel it was to call the police on a child. The officer, noticing her discomfort, spoke firmly. "Ma'am, next time I suggest you think carefully before making a call like this. Police resources are meant for emergencies, not for situations like this. This young lady is doing nothing wrong. Let's leave her be." With that, he turned back to Aaliyah, giving her an encouraging nod before walking back toward his car. The flashing lights went off and the street slowly returned to its normal quiet. But in the hearts of the neighbors, something had changed. Aaliyah was no longer just the little girl selling water on the corner. She had become a symbol of resilience, of innocence defended, of community standing together against unfairness. The very thing that was meant to tear her down had lifted her higher. As Karen walked away angrily, muttering to herself, her figure seemed smaller, weaker. Her attempt at control had crumbled, leaving her exposed in the eyes of the very people she wanted to impress. The karma was instant. Her reputation in the neighborhood was now stained, while Aaliyah's spirit shone brighter than ever, and Aaliyah, clutching the money in her little hand, realized something important. Dreams may be challenged, but if they are pure and filled with purpose, they cannot be destroyed. Not by anger, not by cruelty, and not by fear. She stood taller, prouder, ready to keep going. The air in the neighborhood shifted after the officer drove away, leaving behind a silence that was not heavy anymore but strangely hopeful. Aaliyah stood by her little table, her small hands pressed against the edges of the wood, her heart still beating fast. She had been terrified only minutes ago, but now she felt a kind of strength she had never known. The officer's kindness, the neighbor's support, even the jogger's friendly words, all of it built a new kind of courage inside her. She felt seen, protected, and more determined than ever. The crowd that had gathered slowly began to scatter, but not without smiles and encouraging nods in Aaliyah's direction. Some stopped by to buy water even if they had not planned to, leaving bills larger than the price tag as if to say, "Keep going, we believe in you." Aaliyah thanked each one, her voice soft but filled with pride. She had always believed in working hard, but she had not expected her hard work to become something the whole street noticed. Her mother, Monica, stepped out of the house just then, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She had been inside preparing food when she noticed the flashing lights from the window and had rushed outside. When she saw the police car gone and the group around her daughter, she felt both relief and confusion. "Aliyah, baby, what happened?" she asked, hurrying over to her. Aliyah bit her lip. She did not want her mother to worry, but she also knew she had to explain. "That lady, she called the police on me. She said I couldn't sell water." She looked down at her shoes, afraid her mother would be angry or tell her to pack everything up. But Monica's reaction surprised her. She crouched down, gently lifted her daughter's chin, and looked her straight in the eyes. "And you're still standing here," she said softly. "That tells me you didn't let her win. I am proud of you." Aliyah's eyes filled with tears, not of fear anymore, but of relief. She threw her arms around her mother's neck, holding on tight. Monica hugged her back, whispering, "Don't you ever let anyone make you feel small. You are bigger than their anger. You hear me?" The neighbors nearby nodded in agreement, some even clapping softly at the mother's words. It was a moment of unity, a reminder that strength comes not only from standing tall but from having people beside you who care. Meanwhile, Karen had slipped back into her house, fuming. She slammed her door and muttered about ungrateful neighbors, but deep inside she felt something she would not admit: shame. The very moment she thought would prove her right had backfired in front of the whole community. She had wanted to look powerful, but instead she looked bitter. Her instant karma had already begun. As the afternoon wore on, more people arrived at Aliyah's little stand. Word had spread quickly about what had happened. Some came from a few blocks away just to support her, saying things like, "We heard about what you went through. Keep going, sweetheart." Each bottle she handed over now carried more than water. It carried hope, a little act of resistance against unfairness. Her box grew lighter as the bottles sold, and her small cash jar grew heavier. Aliyah counted the bills carefully, each one feeling like a victory not just for her but for her mother as well. She imagined the pencils, the notebooks, the gifts she would buy, and she smiled brighter with every thought. Later in the day, when the sun began to dip lower, Monica brought out a chair for her daughter and a glass of lemonade for herself. They sat together by the stand, sharing a quiet moment. Monica brushed a hand over Aliyah's hair and said, "You know, what happened today wasn't fair, but you showed more courage than some grown people show in their whole lives. That's what matters." Aliyah looked at her mother, her voice soft. "Do you think people will always try to stop me?" Her mother thought for a moment before answering. "Some will. That's the truth. But for every one person who tries to tear you down, there will be 10 more who lift you up. You saw it today, didn't you?" Aliyah nodded. She had seen it clearly. The officer buying 3 bottles, the jogger defending her, the neighbors stepping in. She realized that when people stand together for what is right, cruelty loses its power. As evening approached, Monica helped her pack up the empty bottles and fold the table. The day had been long, emotional, and exhausting, but it had also been unforgettable. Aliyah carried the small jar of money inside with both hands, proud of what she had earned and even prouder of what she had endured. Inside the quiet house, she placed the jar on the kitchen counter and stood back, staring at it. It wasn't just money anymore. It was proof that she could face challenges and still come out stronger. It was proof that even when someone tried to take her light, others would help her shine brighter. That night as she lay in bed, she thought about everything that had happened. The sirens, the flashing lights, the fear in her chest, the officer's gentle voice, the way her neighbors defended her. All of it played in her mind like a movie. She realized that she had learned something powerful. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep standing even when fear is all around you. She drifted to sleep with a quiet smile, knowing that tomorrow she would set up her stand again, not because she needed to prove herself to anyone, but because she believed in her dream, and this time she knew she would not be standing alone. The next morning would bring new faces, new challenges, and perhaps even new confrontations. But Aliyah's spirit was ready. She had discovered that even the smallest dream could inspire a community. And though she was just a little girl selling water, she had already become something bigger, a symbol of hope, of hard work, and of the truth that kindness and determination always outweigh bitterness and anger. And outside, in a quiet house with closed blinds, Karen sat at her window watching. The world had shifted around her, and she was left to wonder why the community had turned against her. She could not escape the reality that the instant karma she had brought upon herself was not going to fade anytime soon. Every whisper from a neighbor, every smile aimed at the little girl she had tried to stop, reminded her that the choices we make always come back to us. Some bring shame and some bring pride. That was the lesson the neighborhood had learned, and the lesson Karen could no longer ignore. The next morning arrived with the smell of fresh summer air drifting through the open windows of Alia's small home. She woke up earlier than usual, her heart filled with energy. Yesterday had been overwhelming, yet unforgettable. She remembered the flashing lights, the sound of neighbors defending her, the officers' gentle encouragement, and the way her community had come together. Those memories no longer made her afraid. They made her stronger. She pulled on her favorite yellow shirt, tied her hair neatly, and grabbed the little sign she had written with her marker. Her mother helped her carry the folding table outside again. The moment Alia set the bottles on the table, she felt her spirit rise. It was a new day, and she was ready to keep going. The first few customers were already waiting. Word had traveled beyond their street, and people who did not even live in the neighborhood showed up. A woman in a blue car rolled down her window and said, "Are you the little girl the cops came for yesterday? Honey, I heard your story online. I had to come support you." She handed Alia a $10 bill and took just one bottle. Alia's eyes widened in surprise, and she thanked her with all the gratitude her little heart could carry. Her mother stood behind her, watching with pride. "See, baby? When you keep pushing forward, even the world outside your own street takes notice," she whispered. By noon, the stand was surrounded. Neighbors smiled, cars slowed, even strangers stopped just to say they admired her. Some bought bottles, some simply encouraged her with kind words. Every interaction made her feel like her small dream had turned into something much bigger. But not everyone was smiling. Across the street, behind her curtains, Karen stood watching. Her eyes narrowed as she saw the crowd growing. She had thought that calling the police would end this little project, but instead it had made the girl more popular. People were not laughing at her, people were judging her. The neighborhood no longer looked at her as a responsible adult protecting the rules. They looked at her as the woman who had tried to crush a child's dream. The bitterness inside her only grew. She stepped outside, folding her arms tightly. A few neighbors greeted her, but she noticed their smiles were colder now, their eyes avoiding hers. She wanted to argue, to explain, but deep inside she knew the truth. There was nothing she could say to erase what she had done. Her instant karma was playing out day by day, and the more she tried to control the situation, the less control she seemed to have. Meanwhile, Alia stayed focused. She had learned from her mother that when people root against you, the best answer is not anger, but progress. She poured her heart into every smile, every thank you, every bottle she handed over. Customers felt her sincerity, and that sincerity pulled them closer. She wasn't just selling water anymore. She was sharing hope. Around the afternoon, an older man who lived down the street walked over with slow steps. He was known for keeping to himself, rarely speaking to anyone. He placed a $5 bill on her table and took a bottle, then paused. "My granddaughter is your age," he said quietly. "I'm proud of what you're doing. Don't stop." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Alia felt her throat tighten as she whispered back, "Thank you, sir." Her mother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, as if to remind her of the importance of that moment. Sometimes encouragement comes from the places you least expect, and it matters more than gold. As the hours passed, her little jar filled faster than ever. People who came to buy water often gave more than the price, leaving her stunned. She realized that her small act of courage had turned into something bigger than she could measure. It was no longer about school supplies or even a birthday gift. It was about showing that even the smallest person could inspire change. By evening, she had sold almost every bottle. Her arms ached from lifting, her legs from standing, but her smile never left. The support she felt from her community made every drop of sweat worth it. At one point, she noticed Karen still standing across the street, arms folded, face sour. For a brief second, their eyes met. Instead of fear, Alia felt something different this time. Pity. She did not hate Karen. She only saw someone who could not understand joy, someone who chose bitterness over kindness, and in that moment she realized the most powerful thing of all. No one could take away her peace unless she allowed it. That night, when she returned home, her mother helped her count the money. The total was more than she had imagined. Enough for school supplies, enough for a gift, and enough left over to save. Monica smiled at her daughter with tears in her eyes. "This is not just money," she said softly. "This is proof that your effort matters. You worked for this. You earned every dollar with honesty and heart. And that, Aaliyah, no one can ever take from you." Aaliyah hugged her mother tightly, her chest swelling with pride. She had faced fear, she had endured judgment, and she had risen above it. The world had tried to push her down, but instead it had lifted her higher. And outside, in the quiet of her home, Karen sat alone. She heard the laughter of neighbors drifting through the windows, the sound of people celebrating a little girl's dream. But none of those sounds reached her heart. She had chosen anger, and in return she was left with silence. Her instant karma was not only the shame she carried, but also the joy she could no longer share. For Aaliyah, it was the beginning of something new. She realized she was no longer just a little girl with a table of water bottles. She had become a lesson for everyone around her. That kindness wins, that courage matters, and that even the smallest dreams can ripple through a community and change hearts. And as she closed her eyes that night, she whispered a promise to herself. "Tomorrow I will stand again, stronger than before." The days that followed began to feel different for Aaliyah. Each morning she set up her table again, arranging the bottles neatly with the same determination as the first day. But now, when she looked around, she no longer felt invisible. She felt supported. People who once walked past her without noticing now stopped to wave, smile, or buy water. She had become more than a little girl selling bottles. She had become a story people wanted to be part of. On the third morning, something surprising happened. A local news reporter showed up with a cameraman. They had heard about the incident from neighbors who had shared it online, and the story had spread quickly. The reporter knelt down in front of Aaliyah and asked gently, "Sweetheart, can you tell us why you started this little stand?" Aaliyah's cheeks flushed red. She was shy, but she remembered her mother's words about speaking her truth. "I just wanted to help my mom," she said softly. "She works really hard, and I wanted to buy my school supplies by myself." "I wanted to surprise her with a gift, too." The reporter smiled warmly and nodded. "That's very brave and thoughtful of you. Do you know that people all over the city are cheering for you right now?" Aaliyah blinked, her heart racing. She had never thought her small dream could reach so far. The idea that strangers were proud of her filled her with a mix of pride and disbelief. Monica stood nearby, wiping a tear from her cheek. She had always known her daughter was special, but now the whole world seemed to see it too. Neighbors clapped as the cameraman recorded, and some even called out encouragement. "We love you, Aaliyah." When the segment aired later that evening, Aaliyah and her mother sat together on their couch watching the television in awe. The screen showed her little stand, her small sign, and her nervous but sweet words. The reporter narrated her story, describing how a child's determination had turned into a symbol of community spirit after one woman's attempt to shut her down. The camera had even caught Karen standing at a distance, frowning, arms crossed. Karen's name was not mentioned, but everyone in the neighborhood knew who she was. That night, her phone buzzed with messages, some friends asking if she was the woman in the clip, others scolding her for making such a call. She felt the walls closing in around her. The fame that had grown around Aaliyah had turned into a mirror of shame for her. Instant karma had not only struck in the eyes of her neighbors, but also in the wider world that now knew her act of cruelty. The next morning, when Aaliyah returned to her stand, something even more incredible awaited her. A group of local business owners came to see her. One of them, a kind man who ran the grocery store, placed a large box of bottled water on her table. "This is a donation," he said, "so you don't have to spend all your money restocking. Keep selling, sweetheart. You're inspiring us all." Another business owner handed her mother a card. "If Aaliyah ever wants to learn more about business, bring her to my shop. We'll show her how to run things. She's got the heart of an entrepreneur." Aaliyah could hardly believe it. What had started as a small idea with a few bottles had grown into something far greater. She realized she was not just raising money anymore. She was building respect, trust, and hope. She was showing people that dreams matter no matter how small they seem. Yet not everything was easy. Later that day, Karen finally walked across the street. Her steps were stiff, her face tight, but her pride seemed cracked. Neighbors noticed her approach and grew silent. She stood before Aaliyah's table, eyes flicking between the girl, her mother, and the growing line of supporters. "You should know," she said coldly, "that you caused a lot of trouble. People think I'm the villain now." As the week went on, the support did not slow down. More people came, more bottles sold, more kindness poured into their lives. Aaliyah's jar of savings grew heavy, but so did her heart with gratitude. She knew she was not just helping herself. She was reminding people that goodness still mattered in the world. And in the quiet of her room at night, she would look at the jar, touch it gently, and whisper, "This is only the beginning." She did not know how far her little dream would go, but she knew she had already learned the most powerful lesson. When you stand with courage, the world will meet you with strength. The week after the news clip aired was unlike anything Aaliyah had ever imagined. Each morning, when she set up her table with her little sign and neatly lined bottles, people were already waiting. Cars that never used to stop on her street now slowed down, honking softly in support. Strangers walked up not only to buy water, but also to meet the girl they had seen on television. Aaliyah's world had grown wider, and though she was still the same little girl with a small table, she carried herself with a new kind of confidence. She smiled with every customer, thanked them with her whole heart, and felt her spirit lift higher each day. What had started as a small act of courage was now a movement of kindness. Families came with children who pointed excitedly at her, whispering, "That's the girl who stood up to the lady." Some even brought her small gifts, a notebook, a set of colored pencils, even a hand-sewn ribbon. Every gesture reminded her that she mattered, that people believed in her dream. Her mother stood close, her pride impossible to hide. Monica had always told her daughter that hard work pays off, but even she had not expected this wave of support. Each time she watched Aaliyah hand over a bottle with a glowing smile, her heart ached with joy. She saw in her little girl the reflection of strength she herself had carried through years of struggle, now blooming even brighter in the next generation. But where there is light, there are always shadows. Across the street, behind a half-closed curtain, Karen continued to watch. Day after day, she saw the crowds growing, the support building, and her own reputation shrinking. She could no longer walk down the block without feeling the stares of neighbors who knew what she had done. Children whispered when she passed. Adults shook their heads, and invitations that once came her way now seemed to disappear. The karma she had brought upon herself was no longer just instant. It was lasting. On a warm Saturday afternoon, the busiest day yet, a small group gathered around Aaliyah's stand. Among them was the same officer who had once crouched down to speak gently to her. He approached with a kind smile, buying another bottle of water. "Still at it, huh?" he said warmly. Aaliyah nodded, her face lighting up. "Yes, sir. I want to keep going." The officer patted the table gently. "Good, don't ever stop dreaming. What you're doing is more important than you realize." The crowd clapped at his words, and Aaliyah felt her chest swell with pride. The people cheered not just for her, but for what she represented. She was a symbol now, a reminder that determination and innocence could stand against bitterness and win. Later that evening, after the long line had finally slowed, Monica sat beside her daughter on the porch. The jar of savings was heavier than ever, clinking with coins and stuffed with bills. Aaliyah counted them carefully, her eyes wide at the total. It was more money than she had ever held in her life. "Mom," she whispered, "we can buy all my school supplies now, and I can still get you a birthday present." Her mother pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. "Sweetheart, you've already given me the greatest gift. You showed me and everyone else what real strength looks like. You taught this whole neighborhood that even the smallest person can shine." The words settled deep in Aaliyah's heart. She realized her little stand was no longer just about bottles of water. It was about dignity, perseverance, and the power of standing tall even when the world tries to knock you down. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Monica and Aaliyah packed away the table. Their home was quiet, but their hearts were full. Across the street, Karen sat alone on her porch, listening to the laughter and clinking glasses of neighbors who celebrated Aaliyah's success. She wanted to speak, to explain herself, but every time she tried, the weight of her own choices pulled her back into silence. Her instant karma had taken root. She had called the police to shut down a child's dream, but instead she had shut herself out from the very community she once claimed to protect. And every smile directed toward Aaliyah reminded her of the choice she had made. For Aaliyah, the lesson was clear. The world may not always be kind, but kindness itself never loses. With her mother by her side and her neighbors supporting her, She knew her story was only beginning. That night, as she lay in bed, she whispered once again the promise she had made to herself. Tomorrow I will stand again. And she knew now, more than ever, that no one could take that away from her. The last rays of summer stretched across the sky, painting the neighborhood in shades of orange and gold. Alia's little water stand still stood proudly on the corner, but something had changed. It was no longer just a small table with bottles neatly lined up. It had become a symbol of resilience, kindness, and unity. People no longer saw just a girl selling water. They saw a lesson, a reminder of what happens when courage meets cruelty and still stands tall. On that particular morning, a crowd larger than any before had gathered. Families brought their children to meet Alia. Cars pulled over one after another, and even local leaders came to shake her hand. Her story had spread so far that she was now more than just a neighborhood name. She was being recognized across the city as the girl who turned unfairness into strength. But for Alia, all of this attention never changed her heart. She still greeted every person with the same bright smile, still whispered thank you with sincerity, still poured her spirit into every small interaction. She had learned that real success wasn't about fame or numbers. It was about staying true to yourself even when tested. Her mother stood nearby, tears glistening in her eyes as she watched her daughter handle the attention with grace far beyond her years. Monica had worked her whole life to protect and guide her child, and now she saw Alia teaching lessons to the world that even adults often forgot. She felt humbled and proud all at once, whispering quietly to herself, "That's my baby." Across the street, Karen watched once again. The days had not been kind to her since the incident. She felt the coldness of neighbors, the silence of invitations that no longer came, the weight of eyes that looked at her with quiet judgment. She wanted to undo what she had done, to erase the call she had made. But life does not work that way. Karma does not wait for apologies. It simply reflects what you give. And what she had given was bitterness. She had tried to crush a child's spirit, but instead her own reputation had crumbled. And as she stood there, watching Alia laugh with children and hand bottles to strangers with joy, she realized the depth of her mistake. The community had chosen the side of innocence, not cruelty. The lesson was carved into her life, whether she accepted it or not. As the afternoon sun burned high, the officer who had once defended Alia returned again, this time without his car, dressed casually. He smiled as he approached her stand. "You're still going strong," he said warmly. "Yes, sir," Alia replied with a grin. "I'm not stopping," he chuckled, pulling out money for another bottle. "That's what I like to hear. You've inspired a lot of people, you know that?" Alia blushed but nodded. She was beginning to understand. What had once felt like a small idea was now a beacon of light for others. She realized that every act of kindness she had received was not just for her. It was for the lesson she had shown them all. By the time evening came, her table was empty once again. Every bottle sold, every hand shaken, every heart touched. She packed up with her mother, carrying home not just a jar of money, but the weight of something far greater: dignity, pride, and proof that no act of courage is ever wasted. That night, as Monica helped her count the money, she looked at her daughter with a seriousness that carried love and wisdom. "Baby," she said softly, "this started with you wanting to help me. And you did. But you gave me more than school supplies or gifts. You gave me hope. You gave this whole community hope." Alia leaned against her mother, resting her head on her shoulder. "I just wanted to do something good, Mom, that's all." "And you did," Monica whispered back. "And that good will carry further than you'll ever know." In the quiet of her room, before drifting off to sleep, Alia thought about everything that had happened. The day the police came, the neighbors standing up for her, the news cameras, the officer's smile, even the bitter glare from across the street. She thought about how scared she had been at first and how strong she felt now. She realized the greatest gift of all was not the money she had earned, but the lesson she had lived. When you face cruelty with courage, kindness multiplies around you. And in the silence of the neighborhood, where laughter and voices from earlier still echoed faintly, Karen sat alone once more. Her karma was not just instant but lasting, a loneliness she had created with her own choices. Watching the girl she tried to silence become a source of light, she finally understood what she had lost. For everyone else, The story of the little girl with the water bottles became a memory they carried with them, a reminder of what community means, of what kindness looks like, and of how small acts can change lives. And for Aaliyah, it was only the beginning. She was still young, still dreaming, still learning, but she had already discovered a truth many people take a lifetime to see. You are never too small to make a difference. And so, the next morning as the sun rose once again, she whispered her promise for the last time in that summer. Tomorrow I will stand again.